The City of Annapolis primary election is Tuesday, September 16th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and if you are in line by 8, you will still be able to vote. There is no Republican primary this year, as all Republican candidates are unopposed and will advance to the November general election. On the Democratic side, there are contested races for mayor and in wards 1, 3, 4, and 6. If you received a mail-in ballot, it must be received, not just postmarked by 4:30 p.m. on September 12th. Ballots can be mailed, dropped in an official drop box, delivered to City Hall, or taken to your polling place on Election Day. Ion Annapolis offered every candidate in the challenge race the opportunity to speak with us. We reached out to each campaign 3 times. Each candidate was asked these same questions, and their answers are presented here, unedited and in their own words. No one received the questions in advance, and in fairness, all of these conversations are being released at the same time. We do plan to do something similar for the general election once the ballot is set. Please have a listen to each of these candidates so you can make an informed vote. All right, well, today we are talking with Ron Gunzburger, who is a candidate for Alderman in Ward 1. And you were actually part of the process when Harry Huntley was selected as Alderman, when former Alderwoman Ellie Tierney had resigned the position to move to Massachusetts. I know at that time you said, I'm in it and I'm going to run. And here we are. We're a couple days away from the primary election, and we wanted to sit down and get your thoughts on various things about the city. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you for inviting me, John. Glad to be here. Let's jump into it.
Absolutely. Well, the big one, city dock, resiliency, flooding. We're moving forward with a major city dock resiliency project. Do you support the current city dock plan, and how would you ensure its success if you were elected?
Well, I support parts of it. There are parts I do not support. I support the resiliency aspects. And when I talk about that, I support raising the walls. I support the hydraulics and technology, the pumps, what we need to do. And I support the raised berm, which is cleverly disguised as a green space park. All those things I think are great, and they'll stop the flooding. And frankly, those alone will eat up almost all the money we potentially have right now for it. And that'll take us several years. So why don't we start on the essential parts? With what comes down the road and what's needed? I think we should use Berta's house as the harbor master office, convert it to that, rehab it into that. If we need to extend it out just a little to add the shower and bath facilities for the boaters that were part of the old harbor master building. I don't think we need the Maritime Welcome Center. I don't support the Maritime Welcome Center. My opponent, Harry Huntley, said, actually, it's a quote from him, the Welcome Center right now is proposed is such a beautiful vision, it's hard not to get behind it. That was his quote to the banner last September. And I think it's essentially, by the time we're done and you're looking at it in real cost, I haven't been involved for a while with large projects, we're talking a $10 to $12 million building we just don't need. And so I don't support that. I do think having a stage down there is fine. We have enough community events, and it will be a great place to bring the community together. I don't think we need the splash fountain. I think we need to focus on the core things that we need to do in the city. And with City Dock, let's focus on the core things we need to do to fix it, to protect the businesses and have a place for people to get together. I also, by the way, don't support a 90-plus slip marina down there. And I think that the city already spent $2.9 million of public funds to do a feasibility study of an electric ferry boat between City Dock and Eastport. That's a few hundred yards, close enough we have a tug of war every year. That doesn't count the millions and millions to buy an electric ferry boat system to operate those few hundred yards. You can walk, you can bike, you can drive your car, you can get on a circulator, a bus that's free, the Green Line. You can take an e-scooter. You can even buy a ticket on water taxi, which already exists. If you want to take that exact same route, that's just 6 ways right there not to waste $10 million of public money. So I think we need, with the whole City Dock area, we need to bring some common sense back to the city, and that's what I'm offering to do.
All right, I want to slide into crime and public safety, and several neighborhoods are facing public safety challenges. And I know when we look back at 24 numbers, Ward 7, strangely enough, I think, ranked among the worst in the city for violent crime with a homicide, 2 rapes, and multiple robberies. City officials are noting that there's common issues like thefts from unlocked vehicles citywide. They've discussed solutions such as better street lighting, community policing to deter crime. What do you think we need to do to improve public safety in Annapolis?
Well, the best way, obviously, always the best way is to target the violent criminals and get them off the streets. And I am the only candidate in this race who has a background in public safety. That I am former law enforcement senior commander with a very large agency when I lived in Florida. We were 5,400 personnel and $1 billion a year budget. And among the programs we did was one that specifically targeted the worst of the worst. And there's a great FBI stat that if you want to go after the actual people who commit violent crime, only 6% of the criminals commit two-thirds of all the violent crime. And you can identify them because if they've already done it once, they're going to do it again. You start looking for who has the history of the gun violence crimes. And essentially, you start watching those individuals so you can get them off the streets for some legitimate violation they commit. But if you keep targeting those who you know to be the violent offenders, you bring crime rates down. And for our agency, we brought it down 23% in 2 years. It was the largest drop in the state. So much so that the state then started a pilot project with other counties to copy what we had done. So programs like that can work. I mean, there are a lot of other programs. You work with community, you build community trust. Um, the violent crime is a problem. Obviously, robberies, any violent crime, robberies are a problem. You have burglaries, which are a problem to people too. I think you focus on that. But part of what you also do is we need to do something to improve the morale also of our officers. And I think they obviously have had a lot of friction with their current leadership. I think part of that came from when they brought in the current chief. He brought in an entire outside group to be the senior command staff, which really demoralizes everyone down below, saying we don't think anyone within the department is good enough to be on our senior command staff. And I think we have to repair that relationship too, because officers that have good morale also become much more proactive, much more invested in the job. Because I think we have some great cops in the city. So you're asking, I think programs like that will do it. I think you can do it by having more visibility at certain shifts and certain times when crimes happen, by having your officers there. You can have officers. I mean, we don't have a big department to begin with, but you have officers fill out their paperwork in some of the higher crime rate areas sitting in the cars then, because at least you still have a visibility of presence. It becomes that. There are other ways to do it, but those are the key starting points.
Well, let's slide into housing affordability. And housing costs are a growing concern for many here in Annapolis. In fact, Maryland, there was a survey of Maryland voters recently that said affordability is their number one concern, even above taxes and crime. And it found that 42% of young renters are considering actually leaving the state due to the high cost of housing. What are your thoughts to make Annapolis more affordable for more people?
Twofold. One part is, if you think about it, 1/3 of the residents in the city are renters. And of that, about, from the number I saw, about a third of them actually get some form of housing assistance already, whether it's vouchers or rent control or whether they're in HACA housing. So for about a third of the renters, we're already doing something in the city that is significant. Um, Part of the affordability that gets left behind every time are the homeowners themselves. So I support the 2% assessment cap that in 8 years now, our property taxes for your average homesteaded owner, that is your primary residence, your average homesteaded owner here in the city of Annapolis, and it doesn't matter what ward you're in, you're paying 44% more in property taxes now than you did 8 years ago. That is double the rate of inflation. That is outrageous, and that needs to stop. And so I support the 2% assessment cap, the same as the county has. And it's certainly something that we could live with. The county not only can live with it, but with the 2% assessment cap, they were able to keep all the current programs. And they actually this year cut the underlying tax rate because it generated enough money. At the end of the day, part of affordability is letting more money stay in people's pockets. And I support that part. For the second part, the reality is Ward 1 is essentially built out for the service industry jobs downtown, for the office jobs, for the marine industry jobs. You can't shoehorn in any more housing into the area because there's no place it's going to go. So I think what we need to do more realistically is instead repurpose our circulators to some extent. Bigger picture, we need to actually consolidate our transportation system into the counties. That we don't need to be this donut hole that operates our own system. We could actually be part of a much more robust countywide system that is a complete system if we join it. And then we can repurpose our circulators for two things. When you talk for affordability, one big one is instead use the circulator to run 24 hours a day between the downtown and other key corridors where there are the jobs and places like Town Center and all the other apartments where rents, frankly, are more affordable because you're not going to be able to shoehorn people into downtown physically. So why don't we actually make it a convenience for people? And that affordable housing doesn't have to be in each ward is the reality. We need to find a way to affect the affordable housing with the jobs that exist. And that's one of the things I've been talking about. That, and I'd also like to repurpose one circulator to run at least during all of the DC Metro hours between Eastport, downtown corridor, and West Annapolis, and out to New Carrollton throughout the all the hours that Metro operates. So then we can connect people also to jobs in DC and to the MARC trains and jobs in Baltimore. So it's just about, again, making things work for the people who need the jobs, but the affordable housing is in the area. It just is not necessarily, I would say, in Ward 1.
Fair. You mentioned jobs several times in that answer there, and we want to slide into a little bit of economic development. Annapolis's economy relies real heavily on tourism and government, which has contributed to some inequality and a reputation that it is difficult to do business here. And there's some people that have actually even said, I'm never spending money in this town again. Some developers out of frustration with the red tape. What can we do to make the city more business friendly, but we still keeping in mind that we have to preserve the charm and character that tourism is built on?
Well, that was one of the questions we got just the other night at the forum you were at. And tourism is important, but our tourism, we have two kinds. We have obviously a lot of the maritime, the sailing community here, but we also have a lot of heritage tourism. People come here because of our community. So obviously protecting our past is our future also for tourism. And there are ways we can expand it, as I talked about. I think for the tourism elements, I'd love to find a way to work with the church, which owns Charles Carroll House, and get that restored, work with the state, work with the feds and others to tell the story of Charles Carroll, which ties to the story, for example, with America's 250th coming up next year, the story of Catholics in America, with him being the lone Catholic signer of the Constitution. It's just one more element to bring one more wrinkle of tourism here, because tourism brings jobs, tourism brings money, and it spends it and helps pay taxes here in town. Now, as for the part about developers, I had an interesting comment in a conversation with one developer. He said, I don't need to get a yes on my proposal, but I need to get an answer. And the thing that bothers me the most with the city is how long things just sit there with no response at all. And he says, I can't do business when I get no answer. If you're going to turn me down, turn me down. Just don't sit on these forever. And I think that's a legitimate concern. But again, back to what I said, even on transportation answer, I'd like to see our planning, zoning permits, all that code enforcement merged into the county. Let's consolidate that with the county. They do it for other municipalities too. And when they're here, they would enforce, obviously, our code here in the city. They'd apply it, but it actually would let us have a much larger operation to do it. And I think it would actually speed up the process. What I hear from businesses in general is how much they like working with the county because it's frankly a user-friendly system and they get good response times. They don't get that here. So again, I think consolidation of those services would work. And that doesn't eliminate jobs of people here, having been involved in consolidations between county and city before from the county side. One of the things the city can negotiate is we want you to absorb our people into your department since you're obviously going to create new jobs for this. And so essentially they come to work on Friday wearing the city shirt and come to work the next Monday, if it happens, wearing the county shirt. So we're not talking privatizing, but we are talking consolidating.
Well, you've answered, I think, my next question is about transportation and traffic, and you've answered a lot of that leading into this. And we do have some issues. We've got congestion, parking shortages, especially during tourist season, and as well as certain events or perennial problems. Public transit options are limited. Residents complain about the difficulty in getting around. And I guess my question is, what are your plans to improve mobility in the city? And you've addressed most of that. But secondarily, what are we going to do with the parking garages? Because everyone is complaining about the 3 different apps that we do need to use to the parking garages. And obviously parking in the residential areas in Ward 1 is an issue. How do we solve this?
It is. I mean, I would like the Hillman garage to use the same user-friendly techniques for paying that you use at the other garages at Gott and so on, but they're not doing that. And they're explaining how for them it doesn't work for them. The problem is I'll be candid with you, John. Unless you can invent a time machine, I don't see how we can undo the mess because we signed long-term deals with different vendors to do different parts in different garages. And I've seen problems. I can tell you one problem is right off of West Street. There's one parking lot, just a flat lot that has the signs up for the city and, to pay by phone, what the code is. And that lot has signs from two different companies. So I guess if you do the wrong one, you get a ticket. If you guessed right, you're fine. But there are signs that are only a few feet apart in the same parking lot for two different companies and with two different codes. So is there confusion? There absolutely is confusion. I think we do need to do better. I think we do need to use, without tipping my hand here, since this is a recording, I think we need to use, I'm also an attorney, I think we can use some legal mechanisms to put some pressure on the companies to return to the bargaining table, to at least get some performance clauses added to the contract so we can improve customer service. That's one of the bigger complaints I hear from the residents, is when they do have an issue with a premium, for example, here in Ward 1, and how hard it is to get someone on the phone who actually is helpful, or to get them to call back, and that they're just exasperated dealing with the company. And so I'd like to find a way, and I have some ideas, to basically apply some pressure points to bring them back to the bargaining table to say, look, what you're doing is very hard for us. Can you guys undo it? And that's when you go, well, we're willing to, but we need to reopen some other parts of the contract too then. And so I think we need to look for approaches like that.
I want to switch over to education and youth. And the city government doesn't control the schools, which are really sort of under the purview of the county. But our leaders still have an impact on education and youth in Annapolis, and we do have a good number of young people that live in the city. How would you support educational opportunities and youth programs here in Annapolis?
Well, I will emphasize exactly what you just said. Education itself is the county. It's the school board. It is not the city. I mean, just like health services are often the county, not the city. But I do support, where possible, where funding is there, after school programs, recreation programs to keep young people active in good, wholesome ways in the community. And I think that actually helps a lot. I mean, we see the interventions with a lot of pre and especially after school programs, and that I support. If you think about it, the Spot Creek former Department of Public Works site, well, now they're talking about building, I guess, hundreds of housing units there. At one point, the residents of Murray Hill were essentially promised that it was going to be used as a large recreation facility because the city has a woeful lack of recreation facilities, green space parks for the residents, and that was going to be a place for even year-round recreation programs, even a facility there, not just an outdoor park. And those are the kind of programs I want, but our budget, frankly, is dedicated to city core functions, or at least it needs to be. Education, as important as it is simply just not a city program.
Fair. City residents do expect open and ethical government. And as stated in the ethics guidelines for the city of Annapolis, quote, holding the public trust requires maintaining high ethical standards, unquote. How are you going to promote transparency and accountability at City Hall if elected?
Well, transparency is very easy. I am approachable. I'm transparent. The walk cards I hand out as I go door to door, every single one of them has my cell phone. It's not one of those fake Google numbers. It's a cell phone I've had for at least 25 years. Everyone can reach me. I have been very clear about everything. Beyond being an attorney, made it through my whole career without any bar complaints. That I believe in transparency. I fought for it. I don't understand why the city, frankly, is rather opaque at times. I'll give you a recent example, which I thought was amusing. A candidate filing, the reporters, I presume you yourself, reached out to the clerk's office saying, hey, can we get a list of all the people who filed right before the cutoff? And the answer was, that's not public information yet. It won't be till after the Board of Election meets and certifies candidates. Well, in virtually every other location I've ever heard of, you would release the list of everyone who filed. And for those who filed at the last minute, you could just add pending review or pending certification. And instead, even as something as mundane as that, the city threw up the walls and tried to keep basically information from the public. None of this makes any sense. I believe in transparency. I wouldn't even mind logs where at least anytime we meet with lobbyists, that's something we report publicly here in the city and put it on put it on the city website, and there's a directory of that. So at least there is transparency for what we're doing. There's certainly on the votes, people see what we're doing, but I think the transparency and accountability comes from how you conduct yourself. And I think my career has shown that that is the way I've conducted myself. I don't think you'd have an issue with any of that. And I think the problem is in the city. I think part of it is even in our legal counsel in the city that I think we need to do better also. And I think part of it is a change of tone there. And that comes from the top down, that essentially the public isn't the enemy when it comes to the information. The information is there for the public.
Well, you somewhat touched about on the current administration here, and the current mayor and most of the council is going to be leaving office come December. And there's been a lot of discussion about their legacy. Some will praise Mayor Buckley. One candidate for mayor had even said he's one of the best mayors we've ever had. But there have also been some criticisms. You look at the City Dock project, which was initially estimated to be about $40 million, and now it's approaching or maybe exceeding $100 million after you add everything back in there. Of course, we're still relying on $33 million from FEMA, which may or may not materialize. But in your view, what did the outgoing administration get right, and what did they get wrong?
I got to admit, I hate the legacy questions, because if you just try to do what's right, it works pretty well. That you don't go into trying to build a legacy. You just try to actually make it run well and fix things. I think the current administration and the council in general, I will say this in the best possible way. I think they're a bunch of dreamers. They dream big. That is wonderful. Sometimes it's like a fire hose of new ideas that are constantly coming. And City Dock started as a good idea, and there even was a lot of public input, and they reached a consensus. And then the city substituted their own vision instead of the public's, the one that was reached. I think that's where City Dock started to go astray. But City Dock as a whole, stopping the flooding, is a great thing. I mean, a lot of the things the mayor did to bring about some feeling of community and to build up are good. But this race isn't about Gavin or Ellen or Mike or anyone who's the mayor, because I don't think people care that much about the past. I think they care about the future. It's an honest answer that I don't think it's that productive to sit there and pick apart the mayor's legacy, good or bad. I mean, we obviously have lawsuits and debts we're going to have to deal with. The answer I would simply give is, when you have a council of people who dream big, I'd like to be the one person up there at least who is a steward of the public tax dollars, who says, okay, do we need this? Why are we doing this? If we want to do this, where's the money going to come from? And if we take the money from there, what aren't we going to do? And I still want to keep our focus on what I still keep talking about, the core city functions: keeping people safe, which is police and fire, stopping the flooding, picking up the garbage, making sure the water flows and is clean, plowing the streets, fixing the sidewalks and the roads. Let's focus on our core city functions. And when we get those right, we can go back to lots of the other big dreams, but let's focus on getting those things right first.
Leads me into the budget here, and Annapolis has to do more with less. We, good, bad, or indifferent, we have the state, county, and federal in the town that does not pay taxes, along with all of the nonprofits and churches and everything else there. So there's always pressure to keep taxes reasonable while still funding those critical services that you mentioned. What, as a council member, where do your budget priorities lie when you realize that we are so somewhat restricted in, our ability to collect the money?
Well, we have not had a problem collecting money. Our budget has skyrocketed, just like our taxes have skyrocketed over the last decade. That we keep taking in more and more money, but then we become enamored with the shiny objects and keep throwing in it more and more new shiny objects that we want to have. The example I gave was, again, the Maritime Welcome Center, which has just ballooned from what it was originally even discussed to be to something like an electric ferry boat system, not connecting the Eastern Shore, just connecting City Dock to Eastport. One idea after another that, I mean, I get it. They saw ferry boats in Stockholm and they thought these are cool, but we're not Stockholm. We're not whatever they are, 1.6, 1.8 million people. We're a city of 40,000 people. And we need to keep an eye on the ball for what our city is about and the character of our city. And we're not competing to be Stockholm or something like that, to be the Stockholm of Maryland or the East Coast. We need to actually keep an eye on our core city functions and do them well. And when we do those well, we can see what other money we have for it, for other programs. But I think that is always my priority. I won't vote to raise taxes. I've made that clear. Barring some calamity, like we have some huge hurricane strike that does major damage, barring something catastrophic, I would never vote to raise taxes in the city, period. That is a simple thing. If families like mine and yours and everyone else's can learn to live within their means, the city needs to too. I get it that if you're sitting there and you have a certain amount of money in your hand and you can either take a huge trip to Europe or buy a car, you got to make a choice. You can't say, no, we want both, because you don't have money for both. And I think that's how we've gotten down this road, is we always want both, and we need to focus on our core city functions.
Voters often feel disconnected from their officials. How do you plan to engage the public and stay accountable to the residents between the elections?
Well, that's pretty easy. I'm pretty accountable and approachable and reachable, and have been for years. Like I said, one is the smartest and dumbest thing I've done during this campaign is the same thing, which is I've handed out my cell phone number to every resident in the district. It is the smartest thing because it shows how committed I am, obviously, to being approachable, that they will always be able to reach me. I always tell them, if you call after 10 o'clock, I'll call you back the next day because I'm sleeping. But as you will always be able to reach me. And I said, for good or bad. And I'm fine with that. Of course, like I said, they never call for good. I don't know anyone who's ever called a politician to say, hey, nice job, keep up the good work. It's usually a call like, why are you being a jackass about this? And I said, I'm cool with those calls too. So one, everyone can literally pick up the phone and call me. Two, you can find me through Facebook, Twitter, or I guess X now, whatever. You can find me on various places. It is not hard, and I've been approachable and reachable through there for years. I engage with people even now in a lot of the community rooms on Facebook, which have good involvement. I'll continue to do that. I'll continue to communicate by social media. I will have a very robust newsletter. In fact, I'll say something nice here about my opponent. Harry's newsletter is very good. I like it. I want to continue in that style when I'm the alderman next. But I will say his newsletter is very informative. So it has a nice style to it. I think that is a great idea. I know other aldermen too use similar styles. Ross Arnett has done a similar one. Others have. I think something like that is good. But I want people to know. They can email me. They can call me. I'll be at community events. You'll see me. I'm at this point semi-retired, so people see me taking my walks every day, usually to take pictures now of other buildings so I can look up their history and post those photos and tell my little history of Annapolis that I like doing. But it's those kind of things to appreciate our community. You'll see me out and about. Come up to me anytime. People do already now. So I'm, like I said, you will not find anyone who is more approachable than me, and I have no problem with anyone calling me anytime.
Well, I'll tell you.
And they'll get calls back.
There you go. Each of Annapolis's 8 wards has their own unique concerns and needs. In your ward, Ward 1, which is typically the historic district and the areas sort of immediately surrounding that, what do you see as the single most pressing issue facing your community, Ward 1, and how do you plan to address it?
I see, well, we have everything from the short-term rentals to having the slowest response times in the city, emergency response times in the city, because of staffing shortages at the fire department, to frankly getting back to even the taxes we pay. All those things contribute to just the quality of life and protecting the special character of Ward 1. And so they each become part of the whole. It is about protecting, if you want to keep calling that, the character of Ward 1. And that involves making it that homeowners aren't at risk of losing their homes. We have in Ward 1 among the oldest homes in the city. And our homes and the whole historic district are really the economic engine that brings in all the tourists to this town, or at least a good number of them. And the people who live in the oldest homes are guardians of these incredibly magical properties, but it also means it costs them a lot more money to maintain those homes than something that is much newer. And so the reality is, by working for the homestead, the 2% cap that I support, that allows people to actually put their money, keep their money, use it in their homes, keep it up, which keeps the appearances up, which helps brings tourists in. If we actually focus, like I said, on the city council, on the core things like how we spend the money in public safety, getting back to core things, we can actually add our staffing for the fire department, and which we need to staff the 5th Rescue Unit, and we can have the response times here improved to meet the national standards in Ward 1 to keep people alive, something that's important. And like I said, one piece after another, and the other part is just the short-term rentals. What can we do to get back to protecting a neighborhood feel for actual neighborhoods while allowing some short-term rentals and hopefully much more long-term rentals to all coexist? That's the concept. So it all goes back to the character of the district. And I'm glad the way you asked this question, because I always keep emphasizing that I'm not running to be an alderman for the city as a whole. I'm running to be the advocate, the fighter for Ward 1. I expect each other member of the council to fight for their wards. And what that means is, at the end of the day, how we come together is how we build a greater city. But each of us obviously has to place the needs of our ward first, and that is the way I'm looking at this seat.
Well, it's interesting that you said that you're there to represent the Ward 1 there, but in reality, you're also representing the city and the citywide interest there. And as a council member, obviously you're going to represent your ward's interest, but you also have to make decisions for the overall good of the city. How are you going to balance out the needs between your ward and the needs of Annapolis as a whole?
Well, as I still said, I'm still placing the needs of my ward first, because as a whole is how the council comes together and does things. And the city as a whole, as an economic engine, benefits everyone. And to a large extent, what we're talking about for roadways in the area, for how we maintain things, for everything from calming traffic to safety, the safety issues benefit the whole city. A lot of the things benefit the whole city. The tourism ultimately benefits our economy in the whole city. So that's why, and frankly, tax relief, my number one thing, tax relief benefits the whole city, because what I point out that with the 44% higher tax bills now than just 8 years ago, well, perhaps you can make the argument that wealthier people in Ward 1 can afford to pay it, albeit begrudgingly. Some of the poorer families in the city have gotten that same tax hit, and they're living in homes that their grandfather or great grandfather built, and it's multi-generational, and they're actually at risk of losing it. So I think a lot of the things I'm advocating that help Ward 1 help residents citywide. I mean, that is the approach I'll take. Having a 5th rescue unit staff during the core daytime hours to bring the whole city into, so we meet basically the national 4-minute response time standard, saves lives citywide. Getting a 2% cap, which helps homeowners, protects homeowners, which are frankly 2/3 of all our Annapolis families. It protects 2/3 of the residents citywide. So the things I'm talking about that will have a major impact on Ward 1, frankly, will help the city as a whole.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ron, as we start to wrap it up, we've got about 14,000 people that subscribe to the podcast, and whoever may listen to it at Eye on Annapolis or our socials or anything like that. I want to go with an open mic night, please. No singing. We've heard some of you politicians sing, and it's not pleasant. So we'll just offer the mic open and open-ended question.
I would, by the way, I would be on the not pleasant to listen to sing list.
Duly noted. But let's pitch the listeners. Why do we want to vote for Ron Gunzburger for Ward 1?
Here's the reason. First of all, thank you, John, for having me here. And yes, I need your vote for Ron Gunzburger, all of you, for Ward 1 on September 16th. That I want a better, safer, more affordable Annapolis. That means we need to add the 5th rescue unit, staff the 5th rescue unit. We already own the vehicle, which is what's crazy. We don't have a dedicated staffing unit for the key core hours. We need that so we can actually improve our response times. We do not meet the 4-minute national standard in Ward 1. We do not meet it. I support staffing it. My opponent, Harry Huntley, has actually called it unnecessary. That is why the firefighters have endorsed me for city council in Ward 1. And it's even more remarkable because they noted to me that In their entire history, the Annapolis firefighters, this is the first time ever, going back as far as they can find in their records, they have ever endorsed a challenger against a city council incumbent here in Annapolis, which is pretty unprecedented. And they said, because I actually get what's involved and my opponent does not. And he's prioritized everything from some of these vanity projects to buying the Christmas decorations to other things, overstaffing an ambulance squad. And you look at other things too. When I talk about the fiscal responsibility, I support the 2% assessment cap for homesteaded owners. Harry does not. I support fighting, basically, I do not support the spot zoning to allow a higher hotel at City Dock. Kerry not only voted for it, it's in the city council minutes on May 12th, he then introduced an amendment which would change one word, an or to an and, that although it makes it nominally a little more, one more condition you have to meet, it is the mayor's spot zoning amendment with a one-word change so it allows the higher hotel. I don't support the Maritime Welcome Center because I think it's a waste of money and it's also not a good fit for there. He's called it a beautiful vision. If you look at other things, I didn't support doubling the city council salary. He kept announcing he was opposed to it, but I'll read you a quote from the Capital Gazette. It's not my words. Huntley says he's opposed to the increase. However, he voted to introduce the resolution last month and voted Monday to approve the resolution. That was the Capital Gazette on May 25th. So if you look at it, one thing after another, it's just a difference for how we approach this. And I think Harry's a good person. We just fundamentally disagree on the direction the city should take. And I think an election like this is actually a good election for the voters too, because when everyone agrees, which openly sees in the mayor's race, you get down to much more of a personality-driven campaign. But when you actually support different things, you're giving the voters a choice about which path they want the city to take. And that's why I think the choice they have between Harry and myself is a very good choice because they have it at the city's future, certainly awards one future, in their hand as to which way they want to go. And if they want to rein in the excesses in spending, rein in the excesses in taxes, want to return the focus to the core city functions like public safety and resiliency and fixing roads and sidewalks, plowing the streets and things we need to focus on, I'm the candidate. If you want lots of grand projects, which also involve lots of tax dollars to pay for them, I'm not your candidate. But I'm Ron Gunzburger. I'm running for Alderman. Visit me at Annapolis, Annapolis.com. You can reach me anytime. My email is ron@Annapolis.com. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And I said, let's chat. Thank you for your time, John, for having me on today, too.